Writer Media Group original.
Welcome in to the Versed podcast. My name is John, and thank you for joining me on this daily pursuit to become more perceptive to what the Bible says. Glad you are here. Today, I'm going to be checking out Romans chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Let's do it. It's probably safe to say that every single one of us have been agitated by those in power at some point, particularly the government, particularly in the past decade or so. Now that I think about it, agitated is probably too kind of a word. Throughout the years of political discourse, there, another kind word, but throughout the years of that, I've seen Christians throw around today's verse pretty frequently, and in my opinion, too carelessly, and only convenient when it fits their political persuasion. It has to do with submitting to government authorities. I feel like Americans, and I can say this because I am one, in general, have an aversion to submitting to anyone, particularly governing authorities. It's like baked into us at our foundation. So perspective is important here as we read this verse. Paul wrote Romans 13 to the church in Rome while Nero was the emperor, and the Coliseum was just at its peak glory. Nero, who would eventually behead Paul, Nero, who would crucify disciples Peter and Andrew on an upside-down cross and an X-shaped cross. Nero, who would make some Christians into human torches and use them to light his garden parties. Think about that contextually. Submitting to authorities. This is who he's talking about. Obviously, Nero puts even the worst American politicians into perspective, so knowing that, let's read Romans chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. Everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. How is it possible that Paul can write that, knowing what he's up against, knowing the kind of person that Nero is, knowing that he's cruel and evil and tyrannical? One explanation that I've heard from John Piper and some others, Jason Van Bemmel, my pastor friend from Forest Hill Presbyterian Church, I talk about him a lot, they say that Paul is describing the good purpose God has for the government. Just like God has good purposes for marriage that not everyone embodies and not everyone fulfills, it's the same for the government. And so as we read on, actually, in Romans on the other side of verse 2, Paul goes on to say that governments are appointed by God to protect those who do good and punish those who do evil. Military and police are given weapons to arrest and imprison criminals, to defend and protect innocent people, and to wage just wars to protect those innocent people. Yeah, when I continued reading, I had probably the same thoughts you're thinking now, because what this doesn't change is a sad truth. And it's a sad truth that there are many police officers who abuse their power. There are military who commit war crimes, cruel ones, and there are governments who persecute those who do good. And when that happens, let me be clear, they are not acting according to God's purpose for them. It's important to honor and to respect those in authority and to obey their commands, their lawful commands, that is. They've been given a call by God. God has called them. No matter who they are, what side of the aisle they're on, they have been appointed by God to their position of authority, whether we like it or not. And it's our call to help them in their calling. It's our responsibility to pray for them, no matter how difficult that is. It's our responsibility to pay our taxes, to support our government to the best of our ability. However, what we should not do is obey unlawful commands. If someone in authority asks me or you to harm an innocent person, we have to refuse that, even if it costs us, and even if it costs us severely. It's our responsibility to seek truth and to speak truth to those in power and to encourage them to turn towards justice. Just because human authority is limited, just because those who are exercising that authority have flaws, that doesn't give me or you a free pass to insult them, to judge them, to ridicule them, or undermine them, just because we disagree with their political position or their policy decisions. Christians, in particular, are so often quick to disparage those in power if we disagree with their policies. And we're too slow to speak truth to those if we agree with their policies. That somehow the ends justify the means. Ultimately, and this is the point I want to close with, our loyalty to earthly government is an expression of our greater loyalty to God. Really convicting stuff. Incredible perspective to see just what our priority should be while we walk this earth in this vapor of a life. And even how we view those in authority, that they are children of God, appointed by God. It doesn't mean they're perfect. But to obey lawful commands and to do all that is just showing our gratitude and our loyalty to the one who created us. We're going to take a minute to reflect, to pray, to meditate. You can do whatever you'd like with this next minute or so. It's always a good practice. So many people have said that this time is extremely special and intentional for them. So let's do that, and then we'll come back on the other side. Friends, I hope this podcast is encouraging to you and that it is helping you grow deeper in your faith. It certainly is doing that to me. And specifically, just the pursuit of perception, the pursuit of what God has to say, is just developing this fortitude that I didn't have before, that I can face the troubles of this life stronger and more confidently than I have before, and I hope you're experiencing that same thing. I encourage you to check out the resources that I use to build these podcasts, that I use in my own personal studies. You hear me quote from a lot of different people. The links to their works are in the episode notes. I use a lot of people, Dr. Tony Evans, Ligonier Ministries. You've heard me talk about my friend, Pastor Jason Van Bemmel. There's a link of so many resources. Desiring God and John Piper, we even quoted from him today. I always say that I don't want you to necessarily take my word for it. I'm just kind of translating what I've learned from these brilliant people, and just sharing kind of those special moments. So I encourage you to check out those resources for yourself. There's some really incredible people. There's a form there to submit a verse you'd like included in a future episode and any questions you have about the Bible and Christianity, as well as a link to my social media. I would love to connect with you. If you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and a review in whatever your podcast platform is, or a comment or anything you'd like to do related to the podcast, please do that. That will help the podcast continue to grow. Make hope louder today, my friends. We'll talk tomorrow.